everybody. Today I'm going to do an inspired Bridgerton theme. So I've got my wisteria, I've got my blue butterfly, and we're going to go ahead and paint just a nice simple pastel-y scene with some like a foggy day with some green foliage and maybe a bridge and some wisteria coming down the side. So I'm going to start off with a big brush, and I'm going to dip into the white and also water because I really want to cover this. So I'm going to add water. So I'm adding the water to moisten the canvas. You don't always do this in every single painting. Sometimes it makes the background super delicate. But we're just going to quickly put on our paint in our background and then let that dry. So I am just layering on some pretty thick white with water just to kind of get that on there. And I do want to do full coverage with this. I also want to work very fast while I do this. So I'm just making horizontal brush strokes to get the actual paint on there. I'm going all the way to the bottom. And then going back to really make sure it's on there. All right. I want the very lightest, faintest blue sky, so I'm going to touch into a little touch of blue, but then blot it off to the side, and then kind of mush that and add a little bit more white to that to get the faintest of blue. And even that's too much. We're just going to quickly blend this in just to get a very, very, very light, very pastel blue. We're going to keep it a little more on the top side. It really is just a very faintly blue. All right, I'm going to touch into a little bit of light green, and this is going to be in the water reflection. Hugging that more in the middle. Just really ever so very barely there. All right, so our background is pretty set. We will probably want to add a little bit of a darker green. Well, we're going to let this set first before we add that. I do want to add some foliage in the background, so I'm going to go back into my green and just kind of tap that off on the canvas. And we're just going to tap our background and just try to get some bushes going on in the background. And we can overlap. Really subtle, just bushes. And we'll do that again for this side. And I'm just tapping my brush, creating irregular little taps. Because the canvas is wet, it's going to lift off some of this. We'll add a little bit here in the middle. Making the bottom half just a little bit darker. Now I still have a little bit of the light blue from the sky on my brush, but it should blend right into the green. Oops. Well, I have to add a little bit more green to that. All right. Now I do eventually want some trees. So I'm just going to pick up a little bit of a smaller brush and add some tree trunks. I've got a little bit of brown. I'm going to touch into maybe a scoop or two of brown. I did too. And maybe a dab of black just to get it a little darker. We're just going to create some little idea of where some of these tree trunks are going to go. Now the foliage is probably going to cover up some of this, but we do want to provide some kind of like a base. So I pretty much have one tree over here. I'll go back over it. And I might need to go back over it again. And we'll add another one on the left side as well as the middle. So we'll just add a little tree going up, some little branches. This one's kind of at an angle. And we'll thicken up the trunk. And I will most likely add another coat because it's very wet, very pastel, and I want this to be darker. But I do want to figure out where the tree shapes are. And I'll go ahead and add one more to the middle. And this one will just be a little thicker. Eventually thicker, but a different kind of tree actually. All right, so we'll leave that alone. We will probably want to put in some kind of a reflection, so we'll just go ahead and softly put a little tree in there. I'll go back over it later. All right, I'm going to go back with a smaller brush, but a round brush, to create some more foliage, maybe just a little bit darker in some of these areas. All right, and now I also want to do it in my trees. So I think I started off with this tree, and I think I want to make this tree more like a weeping willow. So I'm just going to add my brush and just start to create some little going down to the ground vines of various lengths. Some are longer, some are shorter. I'm going to add a couple more poofs to the top. And see, my branches got covered up, so that's okay. I'm going to add a little bit of white to the top of this, so it's just a little softer on that bright kind of cloudy day. Just makes it kind of distorts the colors. We just want it to be a little lighter on the top. And I might go back over this with a little bit more white once it dries. A little bit more. We'll also go over with a darker green just to give it a little bit more percentage of just different kinds of greens, shadow, highlight. All right, so we're gonna probably move on to the tree on, we'll go to the one on the left because it's probably a little drier than the one in the middle. And this one we want to make it round, really round. A We'll leave some little peekaboos through the tree. Probably should have done that for other parts of the tree. And sometimes if it's still wet, you could tear off a piece of paper towel and just lift some of it. Sometimes if you shimmy, that will also help. Then you can go back over and give it a little bit more of a natural poof, puff. There's a little peekaboos in there. Alright, we'll probably do the same for the middle one. Give it a nice poofy look. Little peekaboos in there. A little denser at the top. Oh, I got a nice glob on there. And now let's give it a little bit more of randomness. And maybe tear out a couple little peekaboos. Alright. And we're going to kind of mirror that in the water. So, I've watered down a little bit of the lighter green mix that I created. And water kind of has that interesting reflection, so it doesn't have to be perfect, just very similar. And we'll do it again. A little bit of water, a little bit of poof. Probably should add some more water. And that just feels a little too soupy. I'm just soaking up a little bit of water. I'm going back in with just a little tiny bit more of paint. Less water, more paint. Get it a little wetter. Just so it dries a little bit more transparent, like the one that's over here. And maybe we'll soak up a little. Okay, I'm going to go back into some water in that brown mix. And I'm just going to add a little tree trunk. And maybe go back over the tree trunks that I had. And it's still just a little bit wet, so leave that alone a little bit. And we'll do this one. This one's at an angle. And we'll leave that alone for now. So I think I'm going to just let this dry a little bit, and then we'll rework some couple of areas. But let it dry. Okay, I've let it dry a little bit, but it's still a little bit wet down here, which is fine. So I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to go into some white. And I just want to tone this down. So I'm just kind of creating the illusion of water. I'm just going to go back and forth and streak a little bit of white into this. And if some other green gets kind of, you know, tossed in somewhere else, that's okay. We kind of just want the illusion of ripply water. So we're just going back and forth, adding a little bit of white. That was too much white. And the beauty of this is that you can just get your brush wet and lift it and reallocate it somewhere else. A little bit more white on this side. A little too much green going on here. But we just have the illusion of water. A little closer, make a little more of a horizon line. And so I lost some of my brown, so I'm just going to incorporate a little bit more back into that. And I'll just do it for all of them. Draw out a little bit of the branches. All right, so it's a little lighter there. I do want it to be more of a misty morning, so I'm going to clean my brush and add a little bit more white and soften up the top of these trees. Just a little softer. All right, and I think maybe we'll just let that set up a little bit more and let it dry, but now it's a little softer, so it feels a little bit more kind of, you know, misty morning. Yeah, a little bit more. And down some more areas, but yeah, basically just want to let this dry. All right, we've let it dry a little bit, and now I want to start to incorporate a bridge. So I chalked out a little, but I can't really see it. I just needed the guideline to see where the proportion was going to go. And I want to make sure that I have a little bit of the reverse going on here. I have this little eye underneath the bridge. And it will be brighter here. I'm going to soften it up and maybe add some side banks. Don't know yet. We'll see how it goes. I'm just trying to make a parallel line. Curvy line, so sometimes it's challenging. Alright, that feels kind of proportional. I'm going to drop it down a little. I'm kind of just creating a triangle at the base. We'll do the same for over here. Alright, so I pretty much have my bridge, the constructs of it. Now I want to build up a little base that's kind of on the side, so we have some, you know, grasses of a path leading to the bridge, because that's the distance. So I'm going to add a little bit of green and add a little tiny bit of landmass. Just to gauge that that is indeed structured ground for the bridge to sit on. Now, if you are painting and following along at home, it's always good to do the gallery wrap, which basically just means painting the sides. You just add a little color on the side. And we'll do it again over here. Make that a little flatter. Really need to make that more dense though. Hide the tree. Well, I think maybe another layer will probably, it's a little too wet, so we'll just leave it be. Then we'll pop on over here. Gonna map out where our landmass will be over here. And we'll leave that alone for a little bit. We're gonna go back into the bridge and add a little bit more white. Be careful of that green spot. We're gonna add a little tiny bit of black to a little bit of white to get a gray. We want to give it a little tiny underside. Give it a little bit of depth. Okay, we're going to lightly add a little bit to the bottom side. I'm going to go back into the white and add some little heavier white in the water. Alright, I'm going to go back into a little bit of the gray with my white still on my brush, so I get an even lighter gray. I'm just going to add a little tiny bit to the top. You can kind of see that the bridge is there. We're going to add a little tiny reflection along the edge. I'm going vertical brush strokes. Okay, we'll leave those be. I do want to go back into the bridge and just soften up some of those brick lines or stone lines and just give it a little softer feel. So it's barely there. I'm also giving it another coat of white so that the undercoat hides a little bit more too. You don't want to see this tree. And pop it to the foreground. I'm going to go back into the white and a little bit of water and add some more little water lines. Really soften up this area. Just really give it the illusion of water, just creating those little lines. I think I want to give it a little bit more of a land kind of pathway right in here, so just a little darker in this area, like people have treaded this. I think it's still a little too wet, but I do want to just kind of mush it into that green. Alright, I think I'm just going to leave that alone and move over here. I think this side will be more receptive because it's a little bit drier. Yeah. Okay, whatever. I think the wisteria is going to cover it. Alright, so let's just give this a little bit of a dry on the top. I'm going to go back into my water. I had a little bit of green on my brush, so I decided to just mush it off. But I want to go into the white and add the smallest little touch of blue for the foreground. Ever so slight, just to kind of mirror it and give it a little bit of a bluish reflection. It's really subtle, and I don't even know if the camera will capture it, but it was lighter blue up here, so a little bit of lighter blue down here. Oh, that is so much blue. Alright, well, that's sitting in pretty good. And we'll just soften it up with a little bit more blue. And add more of that in the water line. Alright, we're just going to let this sit up and then, well, actually we can probably go ahead and start our leaves. So I have a darker green that I want to use, as well as that sort of sagey green I've been using. And sorry, it takes a while to get out. Alright, so we're going to go into a little bit of that sagey green that we've been using, and we're just going to create some little leaves. I'm going to touch into a bit of a darker green and maybe go back and forth between these two colors. I am creating very random brushstrokes because the flowers are really what's going to show through, and the wisteria is going to kind of pop forward. So just creating some little leaves. And back into that darker sagey green. Green is very bright, but it's also in the foreground, so you know, it's got a different feel of color from the foreground to the background. All right, now we'll let it dry. When we come back, we'll add some wisteria to this and encase what we have. So let it dry. All right, I've let this dry. It seems to be a little drier on the left side than the right side, but that's okay. So these are going to be little peekaboo leaves, and we're going to cover them up mostly. We do want to do a purple. I have a purple on here, but it tends to be a real thin purple, so it's usually better to just take a scoop of blue and a scoop of red and make your own dark purple. And if you want it to be more of a red purple, add more red. If you want it to be more of a blue purple, add more blue. And we'll just add a little touch of white just to lift this. You can actually see it, which hue of purple you have. I'm going to add a little bit more red. And I have a pretty good purple. So I'm just going to take my brush and start to tap down little tiny drop downs of this wisteria. And it's going to be a little thicker up top. And some of them pop down a little bit more. And this one will be a little longer. And we have another little wisteria tree over here. Let's dropping these down. We'll just kind of leave it there for that side. And we'll add a couple more popping down. Alright, so now I've pretty much framed the outside with my purple. I'm going to just touch into a little bit of white. I still have purple on my brush. I'm just going to start tapping away from where I started. Just kind of overlap, picking up some of the color that's already in there and adding a little bit of white. I'll just give it a base for right now and then go back over it with some more color. Alright, so I have a pretty good base as far as the purple. Now I want to add a little bit of pink to this. I'm going to just take a scoop of red and probably about 2 scoops of white. Alright, I'm going to take what I've mixed and then pick up another scoop of white and mix that somewhere else to get a little softer of a pink. So now I have 2 different colors of pinks. And I'm just going to start to kind of tap some of the pink onto here. Alright, I feel I have too much pink over here, so I'm going to go back over with just a little bit of the purple. And or to tone that down a little. Alright. Now I can go back over into a little bit of white and be a little bit more random and specific about it. So it's whiter in some areas and just a little bit darker in others. Alright, I'm going to take a smaller brush and add a little bit more of that darker purple and just sneak that into a couple of spots just to give the shadow back in. So now I have a smaller brush. I'm going to start adding smaller little dots here and there. And I'm just creating an illusion of wisteria. So we're going to let this dry. So I lost some of my leaves on the left side, so I'm just going to incorporate a couple of them and just bring them back in, just so I kind of have some balance as far as the green. And I'm going to go back into the other green. Alright, so we've got a little bit more green going on there. And I have a fuchsia color. I'm going to go back into my big round brush and clean that. And I have this fuchsia color, which is a really bright purple. I'm going to start to incorporate this into my wisteria to give it a little bit more of a different pop of color. We don't want to add this everywhere, in random clumps. And some of the other colors might still be wet, which actually might blend that in, which is fine. So if it's dry, it'll pop. If it's not, it will just blend in. Now you have all these different percentages of purples and lights, darks, and now we're introducing a completely different color just to give it some more oomph or pop or warmth. Purples can be cold. If they're a little redder, they're warmer. And I think we'll just leave most of that purple up here. It's just so pretty. we can add a little bit more pop of white here and there. Just kind of layer that up a little bit more. And we'll go back more into some of the other colors. I'm adding a little bit more of that fuchsia color, just so if it pops with the white, it'll just have a lighter version of that. And we'll go back into maybe some of the darker purple we originally made, give it more shadows. All right, and we will just let this dry. So let it dry. All right, you guys, and here is the finished product. Regency-inspired landscape scene of some tranquil water, a bridge, like you're walking through a certain Regency-inspired park. Anyway, you guys, that is the video for this week. Regency inspired. So thank you for watching. Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. And if you did watch this video and you had a good time, you want to share it with a friend, shares would be very much appreciated. Anyway, you guys, see you on the next one.